So I'm gonna start on time, and then this is live streaming in both of our groups. So welcome to ADHD Paralysis. First one I'd like to say is that if you experience this, you're not alone. And if you can see in the group survey, this was the one that the majority chose. And so if you felt bad or if you felt ashamed or struggle with ADHD paralysis, first thing to know is you are not the only one. There are a lot of people experiencing this, especially that right now in this market. And so you have community, and feel free to reach out if you feel stuck, because what I'm going to talk about today, here's the agenda. One, what is it? What are some examples of it? The three types, there's actually three different types of ADHD paralysis. And I think just being aware of this and having names for it can really make a huge difference. And so I did a deep dive on this to give you the bullet points, because there's things you can absolutely do about it. What's at the root of ADHD paralysis? Why do we experience that? Why was this such a thing that was voted for? And then I've got a whole list of things you can do about it to move you forward. That way, depending on how you're experiencing it, how it's showing up, you're going to have different tools to play with if one thing doesn't work for you, or vice versa. So for this call, that's the agenda for today. If you haven't been on these calls, I do 30 minutes of content, and then we have 30 minutes of a Q&A kind of mastermind, whatever that looks like. And so we'll hold questions until the 30 minutes is up, and then we'll open that up. So I'm going to get started, and it's nice to be back. I had a lot of guests come on, which was really cool. And in my head, I was like, they probably want to hear from other people. And I really missed doing this, and I missed the connection. And we had amazing guests. I mean, they were amazing. And it was neat to see that it was voted for me to come back and do a majority of the calls with guests on some of the calls, because that's what I love to do. And so that was kind of neat to see that as well. So what I said was, so I'm gonna reset here. What I first said is that, like, you're not alone, right? So many people in the group voted for this topic for ADHD paralysis, and if you feel this, there can be a lot of shame with it, frustration. There's all kinds of stuff that comes with it, and so know that there's a lot of people that are experiencing it, because a lot of people voted for this, and you're not by yourself. And so the agenda for today is, what is it? The three types of ADHD paralysis. What's at the root of this? And then what can you do about it? That's the rundown on this. So the first one is ADHD paralysis. This is the loss of ability to move. You're frozen, you're stuck, you're paralyzed. It's not, that you left something to the last minute, or it feels hard. You literally can't do it, even if it's something you want to do, even if it's something urgent. You can't do it. You're stuck. And we had people post in the group about that, feeling stuck and sharing that. And I appreciate the vulnerability, appreciate people doing that, because you can see other people feel the same way. So it's not this executive function kind of struggling to do stuff. It's you really feel stuck. And so the other way to describe this with ADHD paralysis, and really what can be at the root of this, is overwhelm. It's like our system gets so overwhelmed or overstimulated that it shuts down. An analogy of that, and I don't know if anybody else does this. Anybody else have a lot of tabs open on their computer sometimes? Anybody else? Okay. Yeah, it's not uncommon. Okay, so it's kind of like in our brain, we have so many tabs open on our computer, and there's so much going on that you finally just have to, like, shut your computer and walk away. It's too much. That's what can really happen. There's too much. There's too many tabs, which we have 10 times the amount of thoughts. That's amazing. Our brains process so fast, and we can hold so much, and we shut down. And then there's three different types, which I'll go into a little bit. And so then also it can play in with our emotion regulation, because that's involved with ADHD, feeling anxious, feeling ashamed, feeling angry, irritable, depressed, mood stuff. And then that's really hard to do things when you've got emotion regulation going on. And that's really what it is. So here are some examples. One, avoiding a project at work because you're worried you won't meet a deadline, or you have a hard time choosing between which tasks you could work on. Definitely experience that. Listlessly walking through a grocery store, you have a hard time picking which items need your attention, or you're distracted by items that are on the list. Anybody else go into a grocery store for three things, come back with all kinds of weird stuff? Especially watch out for Trader Joe's. You come back with all kinds of cool stuff because it's cheap too. The dollar store. Another example, you've had an argument with a friend, and you might feel overwhelmed on how to handle it. how you feel, how you think you might should or shouldn't act, and so you just shut down and you don't say anything at all. Or a client, maybe there's some tension with a client or somebody that you work with, and it's like you're not quite sure how to handle it, and there's all these options, and so you just don't do anything. Another thing, ignoring like day-to-day responsibilities, and you might do stuff that feels more fun or is just meaningful. And when I say fun, again, we can have a interest-based nervous system. So this isn't, some people on the outside that don't get it think sometimes it's immaturity or you don't care or you're just going to what's fun and you're being irresponsible. That's not what's happening. We have an interest-based nervous system. Our brain literally doesn't light up on brain scans in the same way as someone without ADHD. It doesn't. And so the dopamine's not flowing, the frontal lobe's not engaging unless it's interest-based, and we can have less dopamine. So this thing that's interesting shows up and, oh my gosh, we're finally starving for dopamine. We get a little bit and we go to it and we're just trying to regulate. There's nothing wrong. It's not immature. You're not making a priority. Your brain's just trying to regulate and help you. And that's why we're drawn to certain things. So here there's 3 types of ADHD paralysis, and this is really helpful to understand when we're looking how to move through on this, because the 3 different ones might have 3 different tools that you use. The first one is ADHD task paralysis. This is when you're hesitant or you're unmotivated to complete a task. You might avoid it entirely by doing other things. Has anybody had, you got to answer emails or call somebody back and all of a sudden you're cleaning up your desk, or you're looking up that CRM or that website or branding instead of, handling that kind of uncomfortable conversation that you need to do. Instead of lead gen, maybe, oh man, let me work on postcards because this is kind of lead gen. So that's the thing. Our brain can kind of shut down or get overwhelmed, and you still want to move. You don't want to just stop, because I haven't met a lazy ADHD person, by the way. I haven't. That's a name that some of us, or label, can put on ourselves. I'm telling you, you're one of the least lazy people ever. I bet a lot of money on that. It's just sometimes we're working with our brain, and so you might do other things, but you're still moving. So that's the first one, ADHD task paralysis, and it can be also related to like where to start first or what task to do. The second one is ADHD mental paralysis. And so we can get overwhelmed or distracted with our thoughts, our emotions, internal monologue, that internal chatter that just doesn't quiet if you're having a conversation with yourself. That's really common to sensory overload, and it could make us just kind of freeze. That could be a little bit more brain fog, shutting down. The brain just says no. You just get apathetic. Have you ever had that, where you can't make yourself do something? The brain's just, it's done. You're going to do what you're going to do for the most part. So that's the second one. And then the third one, this big one, it's ADHD choice paralysis. And so this is, anybody else besides me, analysis paralysis? Anyone experience that themselves? Yeah, everybody's hands are going up. This is really common. This is when we have too many choices and we're forced to make a decision. We might overthink things. We might just shut down completely until a solution presents itself, or it just gets so urgent or somebody's screaming so much that we have to do something because, I mean, there's somebody there, And it kind of a good example of this, or an analogy, is, have you ever gone to a restaurant and you look at the menu and it's way too big and there's way too many food choices? It's just, you got pages and pages. We have a Mexican restaurant here, great restaurant, and oh my gosh, there's so many choices where there's, and if you work in the restaurant business, that's a no-no, because it's way too much. It's overwhelming for the customer and they don't even know what to choose. Whereas if you have a restaurant that says, hey, here's our menu, you got a couple options and these are all our specials that we're known for, everything you get is going to be good, and then you make your choice and it's a lot easier. And so that's really ADHD choice paralysis is, what do I choose? What do I do? And these could be little things too. And so again, ADHD task paralysis, mental paralysis, and choice paralysis. I also want to say with the task paralysis, going back to the first one, that can also be where to start. A lot of times when we have a task that we need to do, we see all the steps at once. So maybe there's 10 steps. And this is part of the executive function, is we see all 10 steps and our brain doesn't necessarily prioritize which one. And so we think, well, if I do 8 first and then I do 4, but then that'll be easier. But if I do 3, and then we can kind of overwhelm and not sure where to go or how many, or planning vacations, or work trips or closings or branding, or I mean everything. It can affect everything. So the other thing with those three, because it's going to determine how we address those depending on which one it falls in. This was, I haven't heard about this before, which I love discovering new stuff as I'm researching this for the week. Is I learned about directed attention versus automatic attention. And this is really interesting. Directed, and they say, and this is from the Cleveland Clinic, directed attention in a person with ADHD is more weak, and automatic attention in a person with ADHD is really strong. And so directed attention, what that means is you're using directed attention to stop engaging in something and you're directing it to something else and you're staying on it. Whereas automatic attention is you can lock on to certain things where we can hyper focus and certain things that are interesting or passionate or pull us in, and we can get super engaged in that. And so ours is really strong in the automatic attention, and it's weaker in the directed attention. Whereas a neurotypical non-ADHD person, it might be flipped, where their directed attention is strong and their automatic attention isn't quite as strong. And again, it can make us passionate. It can make us go to things that are interesting. It can help us not be stuck in jobs. I would say that one of the gifts of ADHD and not being able to force ourselves to do stuff is we don't stay in jobs we hate. You could be in a 9 to 5 right now, making $40,000, paying taxes and hating your life and hating what you're doing because you can force yourself to do that. We can't force ourselves a lot of times. And so we're not in those positions. We're in real estate, one of the coolest jobs there is. And we can just be super passionate. So there is a silver lining to this. And you're not, the other thing is you're not sitting in a training for 6 hours that someone said you're supposed to take, but it actually doesn't help you, but you can sit there and force yourself to. So you're missing a whole day of real estate. You're like, I can only last an hour, and I gotta bug out because I literally can't send some and have a panic attack. And then you go work on your business. So there is a silver lining. Again, ADHD paralysis is not fun. I would take it away if I could. And it is the price to pay for the other really amazing gifts we get with our brain. So an example, just one thing before I go into the causes, example of directed attention versus automatic attention. Here's a really good one. So if you go to the store, we talked about, you go to Trader Joe's. This is Tyler, typical on a Sunday. You go to Trader Joe's for milk, almond milk for me, eggs, butter. You might be, walk around the store and you go, and then you see that really cool thing or that new thing you want to try, or this mochi ice cream that they have, or pomegranate seeds that are cut up with coconut. I mean, cool Indian food you can microwave, and you're just grabbing all the stuff and you check out, and that's your automatic attention. And you get in the car and you get home and you're like, man, I forgot almond milk. I can't have cereal now, but I've got these mochi ice cream balls. Cool. That's automatic attention. So it's also fun. Like, we have fun. We try new things. We're creative. There's a lot of really good things about this, and so I want to throw that out there. Now, the cause of it, one, I want to throw on the real estate market's weird right now. It's wonky. So if you've had ADHD choice paralysis in the past, it's not uncommon for it to be turned up right now, because it can also bring in anxiety or fear if you hadn't had a closing for a little bit, or maybe you've had to let some people go, or maybe you have a big team and your buyer's agents aren't producing and you have to make a really hard decision. And so when you take, let's say, situational stuff or mental health stuff, and you layer it on top of the paralysis, it is hard to make decisions when you're dysregulated. It really is. And so if you're afraid, if you're anxiety, if you just had a fight with your spouse, if you didn't sleep that well, it's going to turn the volume up on that ADHD paralysis. And so that can really play into that. Perfectionism. And I mean, we're kind of causes that really can be tied to a little bit of our ADHD traits that maybe aren't as helpful. Perfectionism. You get ready to get ready. Has anybody done that? If I could I'm going to spend a little bit more time with it. I'm just going to make it a little bit more perfect. Sometimes it can almost be overcompensating, because remember that we have 20,000 more negative messages about our behavior by the age of 8. Many studies show that an 8-year-old ADHD kid has had 20,000 more negative messages. And then layer on top of that, if you're also part of another minority group, if you're a person of color, if you are an indigenous person, if you're part of the LGBT community, if you have some kind of different ability or learning disability, or disability, now you've got an extra layer on top of it, and you might have more than 20,000 negative messages. And so that's a lot. And so we can overcompensate, we can be people pleasers. Perfectionism is really common because we want to overcompensate, and I'm me all the way. That was my numbers. Some of you guys know we were closing over 300 transactions a year with our real estate business, and I still like had imposter syndrome. I still didn't feel good enough, and I thought, well, if we close 400, then I'll feel good about myself. And I realized I was just on this hamster wheel that would never end, and that no amount of sales would make me feel better. I had to make me feel better. And so perfectionism, and I still get caught in it, and I know other people do, is it's just, if I take a little bit more time to be perfect, and then it's got to be perfect or it can't be released. I can't do it. And that can get us really stuck. And it can also really stack our task on top. Because if we're taking 5 times as long on something, we don't really need to do that perfect. Now we've got a backup of all the other tasks behind us. So that can really overwhelm us. All or nothing thinking. So let's take cleaning the house, and I'm just using examples. This is I've totally done this before, and I'll tell you, it gets way better with tools, and I'm going to share all those with you. All or nothing thinking. Does anybody think, okay, I'm going to clean the whole house this weekend? Does anybody thought, I'm going to just clean up all that stuff I've left? I'm just going to crush it this weekend. I'm going to do it all. I'm going to get good sleep. I'm going to wake up, drink some caffeine. I'm just going to do it. And then you get to Saturday morning, and then it's like, oh my gosh, I'm exhausted. I should probably rest today, and then I'll do it tomorrow, or I'll do some of it tonight. And then you rest, and you feel guilty and bad while you're resting. And then it's time for you to do it Saturday night. And oh my gosh, now I'm already just tired, but I didn't do anything. Why am I so tired? I'll do it tomorrow. And the next day you're tired and you feel crappy and you feel ashamed. And well, let me rest up because I want to do lead gen Monday, and I've got to choose between the two, all or nothing thinking. And this one can really get us. So instead of, I'm going to clean this entire house, because all or nothing thinking is really common for us. It's a trauma response. It's also tied to substance abuse, other mental health stuff, very much so tied to ADHD. Instead of, I'm going to get up and clean this entire house, it's, okay, I'm going to choose 2 things to do this weekend, and I'm going to do one Saturday and one Sunday, and I'm going to let that be good enough. And you might get to Monday and you've actually done way more by just choosing to do the laundry Saturday and clean up the dishes Sunday, and that's it. And you've done way more than you would if you force yourself to do the whole thing and do this epic, thing. Now, on the other hand, we can get excited by challenge. So sometimes there's a reason we go into that pattern. Sometimes that can motivate us because we have a short amount of time and we're trying to do everything. And so it's this interesting kind of discernment to learn of what's best for you. But that all or nothing thinking can get us, or I'm going to do this whole project, instead of breaking it down and seeing the little steps, which sometimes we can have trouble with. It's this huge grand gesture, and then it feels so overwhelming, and there's so many steps, and we don't know where to start, and then we shut down. So then I've talked about the emotion regulation. That's big with paralysis. Is, again, it's hard to do things when you're dysregulated. And so we'll talk about that in a second, because I'm going to spend probably the bulk of the time that we have left on what you can do about it. A couple more things that can cause it is time blindness. So that's another thing, is that we can have trouble gauging how long things take or how long it's been. And when we're looking at a list of tasks, that can go, when we see a task, we might think that 5-minute task might take 20 minutes or might take an hour, or we might see that task that we thought was only going to take 30 minutes and now it's due tomorrow and it actually takes 5 minutes, or 5 hours. So we thought it was going to take 30 minutes. It actually takes 5 hours. We didn't realize that. And then we just shut down because we're so overwhelmed and we know we're not going to get it done in time and it's not going to be perfect. And we can kind of just spiral. So what causes it really can be ADHD symptoms, or the traits. I'll say the traits, because we have some really great traits. The traits that are more difficult can cause it, and it's when the symptoms are turned up, and it's really kind of at the root of overwhelm. So I want to spend the next 10 minutes on what we can do about it versus going more into what causes it, because that's why we're here, right? Is to figure out how to move forward. So the first thing that you can do is to step away for a second and just get some movement with your body. Anybody else really get in their head sometimes and just overthink things? Okay, one of the best ways to get out of your head is to get in your body and to move it. And certain ways, depending on how you're wired, can feel safer than others. I've had a lot of like trauma stuff, and this is relevant because I want to share this, because sitting and meditating, listening to my breath sometimes was too much. Like if you've had trauma and it doesn't feel safe to be in your body, sometimes meditation can give you more anxiety. Other people, it's really calming and amazing. So if you're in that camp, go ahead and do that. If doing deep breaths or being in your body for whatever reason doesn't feel good to you, then movement is another way to get in your body that can be meditative. Walking is one step, it's a pattern, right? You could go for a walk and it's a pattern, and it kind of can be meditative. So stepping away and moving your body and getting into your body is so good. And that can get you out of your head, and it can give you some perspective. And so that also exercise, if you're not doing that before your day starts, and you can integrate something into there, it can be really helpful, because exercise directly targets and lights up that part of the brain that's affected by ADHD that's a little bit understimulated. And for some people, it's like taking medication in the morning. And next to medication, exercise and sleep are the two most powerful things you can do. Well, I would say also getting hormones checked. That's a really big one. If you feel like your ADHD is getting worse, especially if you're female, if you feel like ADHD is getting worse as you age, that's something that a lot of people have reminded me to mention. So that's really important. And then I want to talk about dopamine, because dopamine does a lot of things, and we want to create healthy dopamine, which can look like exercise. It can look like playing music. It can be doing a lot of. You could have somebody sitting with you. It could be setting a timer and trying to do things fast. Which, if you're paralyzed, that might be too stimulating. It's kind of that balance, because we can be almost overstimulated and understimulated at the same time. We can be bored and anxious at the same time. It's kind of interesting. It's like our brain's on fire and it's frozen at the same time. And so creating healthy dopamine can be a nice thing to do to kind of help move things. So again, that could be that you go to a new place to do your work. Sometimes just a change of scenery can give you a different perspective, or switching up your routine, or even where you do it in your house or in the office, or if you're standing or if you're sitting, maybe do it standing. So just switching stuff up can be a little bit helpful sometimes. Again, some of this might work for you. You want to play with it. Feeling your feelings, regulating your emotions first. I know I mentioned that a couple times. If you're at a place where you're feeling paralyzed, you're probably feeling anxiety. And so it's like a softness, because what a lot of times we tend to do when we're paralyzed is be really harsh and push ourselves and have this like negative self-talk. Just, come on, you can do this. Let's go. No, come on. We have to, and if you can do the opposite, and you can create like a softness and like a gentleness for it, it can actually help dissipate the anxiety and move you forward. And it seems counterintuitive. And so it might be something to play with. And again, things might work differently for it. Maybe for you, it's just pushing yourself as hard as you can to do that one task, and then it helps. Or again, you might try another time where you have compassion for yourself. And so think of, does anybody here have a kid or have a nephew or a neighbor or a cousin, or as the joke they say, or was a kid at one point in their lives? Okay, great. It always makes people smile. Yeah. And so if you think of it, how would you talk to a kid? This is a really big one. And so if your kid was paralyzed because they had to clean their room and they had to do their homework and they had to make dinner and they had to go, clean up their stuff outside, and they felt so shut down and frozen, they were so stuck, what would you say to that kid to move them forward? That's a great way to look at this. You probably wouldn't say, wow, you're so lazy. You're 15 years old, or you're 7 years old and you still can't figure out how to do that. What's wrong with you? Just do something. Gosh. I mean, how, like, that's terrible. That's traumatizing. That's like emotional abuse of a kid, You would say, okay, hey, that's okay. You're feeling anxious. Like, tell me about it, So you want to hold that space for that, because it feels like for a second, you're might be going backwards, but actually it's going to dissipate and relax everything, because when you're calm and confident and grounded, that's when you can make better choices. So the other thing I want to add in next is, remember that it can be hard to start for us, a lot of us, but then it can also be hard to stop. So have you ever had that where it just feels so hard to start, but then once you do it, then you're good and you go for hours and you can't stop? Or it's like, it's hard to go from vacation mode to work mode. And then when you get into work mode, then you have to go on vacation. You almost don't want to sometimes because you've just got this rhythm and you got the schedule. Some people are like, no, I want to go on vacation. What are you talking about? And then other people are like, yeah, totally. Yeah. So it can be harder to start and then it can be hard to stop. And that's a good thing just cognitively to remember, because we can have issues with task switching, like going from one thing to the next. And when you tell yourself, okay, let me do like one thing, that's it. Let me just do one small thing, because I know once I start that, I'm gonna go. It's gonna be easier. And so if you remind yourself that it's not gonna be this hard once you get going, it's not going to be. Because we can kind of have this story in our head of, well, this is this big, huge task and it's gonna be painful and it's not gonna be fun and it's gonna be really hard. And in the reality, once you do one thing, it can actually be kind of fun. Even cleaning can be fun once you're in the middle of it. And it's like, oh, I missed a spot on the sink, like, oh, let me go over here and let me organize this. And so it can actually be good just to remind yourself that you do one thing and it's easier. And then also that brings in the rule of 5 by Melanie Robbins. Does anybody remember that? The rule of 5? Okay. And we'll talk about that, because tell me if so basically you have, and now I'm just forgetting what it is. If somebody that remembers that, wouldn't mind saying what that is really quick.
You mean the 5,
5,
4,
4,
3, 2,
3,
1
2.
rule?
Yes. Yeah. I don't want to say it wrong. Yeah.
So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and go. Like push yourself up, push yourself off the bed, the couch, the whatever, and to get yourself out of that mode, to get yourself unstuck. Some people will do 3, 2, 1 because for us it's a little bit too long to do 5, 4. But it's the point of like you give yourself to give yourself a break, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, and launch yourself.
Awesome. Yeah. And there's different variations of that. So you count down and say go. There's another variation if you're feeling really, really stuck, where you can do 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then say the thing that you want to do. So let's say it's call the person back. So you say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, call Marsha back, and then you move one part of your body. It doesn't mean you have to get up. Like if you're stuck, you can't even get up, you just move something. It could be your shoulder, it could be your leg, it could be your head. And neuroscience shows that this actually is the first step, and so it can help us move. So that's something you could try if there's something that you're really stuck on, and just see if it works for you. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, answer 5 emails in a row, shrug your shoulders, and then go. Um, uh, Another thing, and I'll go a little bit fast. I'm going to go a little bit over, like 5 minutes over, because there's just a lot I wanted to give you after this week's research, and then we'll move to questions. So exactly 6 more minutes, and then we'll move to questions and mastermind. Go for the easiest task first to get moving. So if you have a list of things, there's that concept of eat the frog, where you do the hardest thing first. If that's not motivating for you, flip it. Out of the tasks you have to do today, what is the easiest one to get done? Start with that one. And then again, that can sometimes get the momentum and get us moving. Watch for the all or nothing thinking. Again, like we talked about, that's a big one. Is it in all or nothing thinking or black and white thinking that you're going to watch for? Is always, every time, never, those are those like kind of absolutes or extremes. Watch for those. And it can also be like big tasks. I'm either do this or I'm not going to do it all. I'm going to knock it out of the park, or I'm not going to touch it. It's going to be perfect or it's going to be terrible. And so just watch that thinking around that, and then choose something small and then reward it. So let's say it's answering 5 emails. So first you say, well, let me do 1 and see how I do, and then chances are once you answer 1, it's going to be better. And then give yourself a small reward. Again, it's like a kid. Don't expect yourself to just be this like disciplined willpower monster. I haven't seen, that hasn't really worked much for clients that I've worked with. So give yourself a little reward. It could be a song you want to listen to. It could be a coffee drink. It could be just a positive thing to yourself, go for good enough instead of perfect is another one. And I'll send the notes for you. Go for good enough instead of perfect. Aim for 80% of 100%. Your 80% is probably 100% compared to a lot of other people with perfectionists. This is a tool. This is actually, I followed an ADHD entrepreneur for this. Make a list, and by anything that's going to take under 5 minutes, draw a 5 next to it. So just write a 5 next to it, and then knock out all the 5 minutes first. So make a list, and that's really at the crux of this. When you feel paralyzed, make a list. That could have been number 1, and then go through though, and anything that's going to take 5 minutes to list, write a 5 by it. and then knock out all the 5s first, and then you have a big win in momentum. Break down the task or write in the first step. If you have a list, when you make that list, what is the first action? And it could be as simple as open the computer. It's not even open up the email, it's open the computer. It's not even call that person back, it's find their number. Let's see. Ask for help. Ask for help. That's a great one. Right in the group. Ask someone you care about, someone in your office. Body doubling, which we have the body double chat in the KW ADHD, where you can hop on our Zoom room that's open 24/7. It's not recorded, and it sends me an email every time you go in there in a special folder, so I can see that you're working on stuff, even if you're the only one in there. Or you can coordinate in the chat, and then you can work on that with somebody else. Designate project time. So choose a time you're going to do that task, and kind of, set a timeline, or set a small amount of time for you to do it where it's not as overwhelming. Maybe just block 30 minutes that day instead of trying to do the whole thing. And just find what energizes you, and kind of play around with stuff and see what works. However you get through it doesn't matter. It's just that you get through it and you like the way that you get through it. So to recap, ADHD paralysis, right? It's really overwhelm. Systems in overwhelm. It shuts down. There's way too many tabs. It's just so much going on, but you have to shut the computer. There's a lot of stuff you can do about it. The 3 types: ADHD task paralysis, ADHD mental paralysis, ADHD choice paralysis. And then those are the steps that we can do about it. So that's ADHD paralysis. We're about 8 minutes over. So shoot me a message if you need anything. We got a whole community, and I'll put a vote for next week's call as well. And yeah, you guys are incredible. Thank you for the opportunity. All right. Have a good one. I trust this helped, and we'll see you next week. All right. Bye.